The biggest person that he had to stand up to in terms of my height and our relationship was his mom. Because she was very uncomfortable by that. And I remember she told me one time, she was like, "You in these heels, like, why do you wear these heels?" And I just got real quiet because I was like, I don't know how to respond. And out of like, it was almost like he darted and he was like, "Ma, I bought her those and I like them very much." And it was at that moment where I was like, "You can have my heart."
Aww.
What's up, fam? Welcome back to our channel. My name is Tim. This is my beautiful wife, Pauline, and you are tuning into the W Podcast, where you get wisdom in a word with the
Wheelers.
Hey, so we are so excited for everyone that's joining us today. First of all, can I just stop and say, we've made it to 1,000 subscribers. What in the world? For those who listen on podcasts, on Apple, Spotify, we love you too. But we've reached to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we just want to say thank you for everyone that's ever subscribed, shared the video. This is a major accomplishment to us. It may be small. It may be small to some people, but for us, we like, look, Lord, we're just grateful to be here. So if you're somebody that's watching this and you watch our episodes but don't subscribe, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us and officially join the family. But we're so excited to have you all here with us. We have a great guest today, Susanna, who is going to be breaking down a lot about how learning yourself, how getting language for yourself, and then how you think and how you process, how that benefits your marriage. She's been married for 12 years, and we're going to get into that. But I'm telling you, buckle up, because honestly, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're dating, or even in the workplace, and we may touch on that because that's where she specializes in, how learning yourself can help you excel in your career and your relationships. So without further ado, let me bring on Susanna. Susanna, what's up, fam?
Welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
How are you doing?
I am doing great. Super excited to connect with you guys tonight. So thank you so much for this opportunity to just share my story and just learn from y'all as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think you got to hear my intro, but I gave them a little bit about you and kind of what you do. But I would love for you to just introduce yourself, let them know how long you've been married and all that fun stuff.
Sure. So hi, everyone. Susanna Alba. I have been married for 12 years. To the love of my life. We met in college, and we have been together ever since. Ebbs and flows, as with every relationship, but we are at a place right now where it's a fun ride. It's been a fun ride for sure. So that's my married life. Professionally, I am a leadership coach for women of color who are looking to land six-figure jobs. And outside of that, I'm also a mama. Yeah, we about that money over here. But I'm also a mama and a ministry leader. Man, there's so many titles. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So you busy. That's like the short end. It's like you out here.
She's talented. She's sharing all of her talents and her gifts across many different areas.
Well, we're grateful for you giving us some time today.
Absolutely.
So I want to start here. I didn't know this, but you said you and your husband met in college.
Yeah.
So did y'all date in college? Like, were y'all college sweethearts, like stomp the yard, or like?
He's not here to defend himself. He's working, but you gotta. At this point, I'm sure you know what he would say. Y'all been together for a long time. You gotta cover his end of the story too.
So our college story is pretty interesting. So when we first met, I was a freshman and he was a sophomore. And we met just because we had a lot of the same classes and I made friends into the same kind of circle that he was. We met freshman year, but we did not start dating until senior year, mainly because, my senior year.
Okay.
Mainly because I don't know if this is going to resonate with anyone in your audience. I had a list of what I thought my man was supposed to look like. And I had to surrender that to the Lord big time. And I learned the hard way, but Eric was and has always been my best friend. And so he saw the ebbs and flows of my previous relationship and what that looks like. And then finally he was like, that's not the guy for you, right?
He was just watching you stumble all over this other relationship. Like, she should be with me. I would treat her better.
For real. For real. And like for me, it was just like we had developed such a unique friendship that I had not been exposed to those types of relationships without them causing problems later on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where you're really good friends, but then later on you become an item and it's like, it doesn't work as an item. So yeah, so we met in college and we've been together ever since.
Okay, so again, we told you when we started that we just gonna flow. So if you're comfortable, we gotta stay here for a second. I think this will help some people.
Yeah.
So you said you had to essentially rip up your list. Do
She
you?
said a more spiritual version.
She
She
did,
surrendered it.
She surrendered it. Yes, that's great. So, do you remember what was on your list? Like, I'm just curious because I think a lot of people do have a list.
Oh my gosh!
And sometimes it's not that lists are bad in general, but sometimes our list can be superficial. So I don't know if that's what you had as far as like he got to be 6'5" or something like that.
Or a lot of times our lists are written in ink instead of like them being written in pencil as we're growing and we're learning. And you're like, oh, maybe you think you want this or you need this, but then as you get to know yourself, especially you're in college, you're probably like late teens, early 20s, like you're learning yourself too.
Yeah, so very superficial, also very different than what I had been exposed to because I was a church girl. So there was that rebellious side of me that was looking for 6'5", like muscles, bow, 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 like all of these things. Yes, he was on the basketball team. I also am very tall, so I'm 5'11". And so to me, I wanted someone who was going to tower over me. And there was this fake notion that his height meant additional protection, whereas that was just not the case, at least in our story.
Okay, so well, hold on, because a lot of girls do want guys who are like 6'5", but you actually have a reason, like you're reasonable for wanting somebody that tall. You can't be 5'4" out here wanting a guy who's 6'5". That's just really
right.
You can do with the 5'9", 5'10" guys. Because I'm not as tall as you. I'm 5'9". I'm taller, but I'm not like the tallest girl in the world. And I always felt that, like, okay, you got to leave the taller guys for the taller girls because it's not fair out here, like, at all.
For
like,
real.
But
for real.
They don't understand.
No, they don't get it. But like one of the things that attracted me to my husband was that he was not intimidated by my height. And so when we were in the dating and courting stage, I loved shoes and still very much do. They look a little different now that I'm a mom, but they were usually high heels that I loved. And those were things that he liked his woman to wear, despite the fact that me wearing a higher heel would make him shorter than I was. Then I would be taller in the relationship. But he was less concerned about what that view looked like and more concerned with the solidity or the validity of our relationship. Does that make sense? So it was more for him, is this person a good person? Do they hold the same values that I hold? And yeah, she's taller than me, but is this someone that I could see myself spending time with and getting to know? And so that was refreshing for me, because while I had an interest in the taller gentleman, it just seemed like there was not that level of maturity.
So how tall is your husband?
My husband is 5'7", 5'8".
Oh, okay. See, this is good. I didn't know that. That is, so you did surrender. So
oh my god,
she said he's taller in heels.
Right, she's like maybe the same height.
I didn't know he was like taller no matter what. Like that. So like, was that a wrestle with God that you had to go through, or by the time you guys started dating, you were over that height thing?
See, that's what I love. Yeah, that's what I love about starting with friendship, genuine, true friendship. Because at the very beginning, like when he and I were just friends, it was like, dude, I can't date a guy who's shorter than me. Like, what do I look like? But by the time we had gotten serious about pursuing a relationship, there was so much more developing within us that height was just not a concern. And that's one of the things that I see a lot of people get tripped up on, is they will throw their pearls before swine, if you will, instead of clutching their pearls and waiting for the right one to show up. So when I tell you I had to surrender my list, it was big time. And I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that I didn't force something that was really not going to bless me.
So shout out to your husband for having that confidence. And I think I don't want people to miss that. Like, even though there was a discrepancy in height, or maybe if someone's listening or watching this, there's a discrepancy in pay, or whatever the discrepancy is, that isn't as important as the confidence and the character that's inside the person that you potentially are considering. Because honestly, as you attest to, that is what matters more. Like, if your husband was 6'5" but didn't have character, your marriage may not have made it to the 12-year mark. Right?
Yeah. And I think that for us, it was a foundational piece, because you just mentioned difference in pay, right? So there got a point in our careers once we were married where I was making more than my husband, which is also something that some people are like, oh, well, he has to provide for me and all this other stuff. And there is this also notion that you can use that as a weapon against your spouse. And no one knew that unless we shared that information. Right. So I think it started with height, and it was a preparation for what was to come. And then once we got to that place where there was an income shift, we had already been through that superficial level and we passed that. So now this was just another kind of layer to develop that character within our marriage.
Yeah, that's good. And we'll move on to other stuff, but we just stuck here right now because it's so good. So
yeah, go for it.
You talked about how there was a pay difference for you all in your marriage. What would you say to somebody right now who, honestly, maybe even from both sides, and this is why I'm thinking about this, because I saw a tweet the other day, and this woman was saying how she was on a date and the guy kept asking her, like, would you be okay dating a man who makes less than you? And she was like, I am. Like, she said that to him on the date, because he had mentioned his salary several times. And I feel like it can be an insecurity on both sides, whether it be from the man who is struggling to be able to date somebody who is making more than them, or it's from the woman who does have that perspective of like, I need a man who makes more than me. Was that something that you struggled with, just mentally? You were already married at that point, but was that an issue for you that you had to work out, and how did you do it, if so?
Yeah. So what helped us was that at one point he was always making more in our marriage. And finally, and Eric has been my biggest supporter and cheerleader. And so there had always been a space where we felt safe surrounding finances. And it took a lot of work to get to that place where finances was not a point of contention, but it was something that we could have an open discussion about and what that would look like. I also believe that there is power in the tongue. And so this wasn't just name it, claim it kind of situation. My husband had seen how hard I had worked, the accolades that I was receiving, the amount of time that I was putting in. So he was just like, of course you deserve to make that. Of course you do. But prior to getting to that place, my husband also, I had been championing him within his career. Babe, go for it. Yes, absolutely apply. Yes, you can do it. So it wasn't a point of, well, I'm going to use this against you, or I can't be with you anymore because you're not on my same level. I think, again, there needs to be a lot of communication and really managing expectations. And I don't know that many people have gotten to that place where they have learned to manage expectations within a marriage relationship.
Yeah, that's good. So moving along in your story, you all started dating. How long did you all date before you actually married?
So we dated, I want to say we dated about 4 years, and there was a 2-year gap in between.
What do you mean? Like,
So
six
we dated
or four? Is it 6 with the
4.
gap?
So we dated for 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we had like a 18-month gap. And then we got back together and were together for 2 years before we got married. And in that gap, there was a lot of growing that needed to happen for both Eric and Susanna. I was coming from this place of, I'm going to rule the world. I'm going to become the chief executive vice president of the world, and nobody's going to slow me down. And I was just really career ambitious. And he wasn't sure that he wanted to be with someone who was so career ambitious and not willing to be a part of relationship. And so there were areas within him that he also had to grow and develop during that time.
okay, so y'all took a 2-year gap, which is so interesting because we've talked about on our channel before, should you take a break with somebody? What does that look like? So for you, what made you even comfortable getting back together? Because for some people, they break up and it's like, you really don't need to get back with that person. But how did you, okay, now it's a good time for us to get back together. We've matured. How did you know that?
So for me, in that time frame, one of the things that I was really clear with Eric on was that I was committed to never cheating on him. And if I ever felt like we were growing distant in our relationship, or there were things that I needed to work out, I would initiate that so that I could be honest and true to the vow that I would not cheat. And I had gotten to a place where I was just like, is this really what I want? Is this really the path that I want to go down? Is this someone that I can see myself spending forever with? Because I didn't want to just go into a marriage relationship just because of my culture. So to give you a little bit of background, I'm from the Caribbean, and Caribbeans, you get married on Saturday, you get pregnant by Sunday, you have your child by Thursday, and then it's happily ever after. And so there was also this outside pressure because I was much older, because my sisters were married. And so I did not want to continue to pursue a relationship without being really clear if this was the right fit, and if this was aligned with God's plan and purpose for me. At this point, it was like, I really enjoy spending time with him, being around him. I feel like there are areas where he makes me better, but I don't know that I want to do this forever. Like, he's a really great friend. I don't know if I'm ready to just be married to him. From his standpoint, he was trying to figure out which route in terms of employment he wanted to go, if he was going to take over his father's business or if he was going to pursue something really different. And we had just difference of opinions, but I could not want a decision for him more than he wanted that decision for himself. And I think that I had seen too many of my friends get with someone under the impression that I can fix him or fix her as we go.
So good.
And I'm not about that.
How did you that's such a good thing, especially for women, because we do tend to be like the fixers, or like people do have this kind of like unloving, like approach to the world, and TV has taught us like, oh, once you get married, things will change. Once you have children, he'll change. And like people do change, of course, because we're people, but you shouldn't marry somebody with like kind of the expectation that you're going to fix them, because it's kind of like a weird lording over them type of thing. Like, oh, I'm going to make you better, you into like my idea of what you should be like, instead of just loving somebody for who they are. So how did you kind of like surrender that to God, or how did your mindset change before you all decided to get married, so that you could enjoy your marriage and enjoy your husband for who he is, but then also kind of like, because what I hear you saying was there was fear that you were kind of dealing with. And I think a lot of women have that, so since you were so career focused at that time.
So the way that I got over that was was really two ways. The first was after that year, like the first year that we were on our gap, I had become so career driven, but I missed my friend. And so there were things that happened where it was like, okay, I'll meet this other guy for like not drinks because I wasn't drinking, but like for dinner or for something like that. But it was in a social environment, and it was like I would find myself comparing this individual to what I knew my heart was after. That was number one. And then again, because I've been in the church the whole time, I was very clear with the Lord in terms of how I prayed for Eric. And I told the Lord, I said, Lord, if this is not the man for me, then make him disappear. If this is not your good and perfect will for me, then move him out of my path. And that is a scary prayer to pray.
Yeah, because you
especially when you are in love.
Right.
And so he didn't disappear.
Now, what was the relationship like during that break? Like, were you still friendly? Did you speak at all? Like, what was your relationship like in that 18 months?
So it was a bit of a roller coaster, just because by this point, a lot of the friends that we had were in the same kind of circles. And so for birthday celebrations or for weddings that we saw, we were gonna run into each other at some point. It was never like rude or fighting or anything like that. It was cordial. But both of us got to a point where it was like, man, I really just miss hanging out with you and talking with you. And so that was how that happened between the two of us. Whenever we would run into each other, it was almost like there was no love lost. And by the time we got back together again, it was just like, okay, now we know that this is the right path for us to be down.
Yeah. Kind of like the boomerang thing, like, or what's the saying? Like, if you love somebody, let them go. If they come.
Yeah.
It's not biblical, so I'm not like standing behind it.
No, you're good. You're good. I get what you're saying.
So you all eventually get back together, and then you were telling us before we started recording, and would love for you to kind of go into it now, how you got married, and the first 3 years of marriage wasn't what it is now. So kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. So it was two kingdoms becoming one. I had so been used to living on my own, making decisions for Susanna, going where Susanna felt fit, where she really enjoyed. And Eric had also had a very different kind of experience. He was working at his dad's job. He was still with his parents, saving money, where I was kind of already living on my own. So when we got together, when we got married, I was still working at a college. My background is in higher education. So I was managing a building of 200 plus students, and I had my own apartment. So I was used to having my own space and coming and going as I wanted to. And like y'all, I enjoyed going out to eat. I enjoyed shopping. I, for the life of me, could not understand how he could spend 4 hours on Call of Duty. It was just like, dude, I can't. Like,
I don't get that either.
Right. So there was a level of adjusting that needed to take place. And there was also a level of learning how to meld those two worlds together. Because for as much as I enjoyed being out, my husband was a homebody. I didn't figure that out until we were married.
Yeah.
You know, so it was like I was ready to go, and he was like, do we have to go out again? And I'm like, yes, we do. And he's like, I really don't want to. So there were moments where that was like a learning curve. Also understanding how to unpack conversations when he didn't have a good day at work and when I didn't have a good day at work. And not be in a place where it's like, no, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault, you know? And even like simple things like understanding the things that I liked now as a married woman over the things that I liked when we were dating, because those things change. So being able to just have those conversations. Now, looking back, hindsight is always 2020. Those conversations were heavy. They were hard. We argued quite a bit. And then we got to a point where it was like, this should not have to be our normal. So help me understand where you are coming from. Yeah. And I had to learn how to listen with the intent of actually being present, to listen, to understand, not to respond.
Yeah, that's hard because we want to get our point off.
We all think we're right. I mean, of course, else why would you have that perspective?
So I'm curious from your perspective now, 12 years of marriage, you talk about how there was things you just didn't know before you got married about your husband and his personality and maybe even some of your personality. Do you think any of that is something that you could have learned before you got married? Like, is there questions you could have asked or work you could have done? Or do you just think those were just natural learning pains that you were going to have to go through?
Yeah, I think that it depends. There were probably certain areas that we could have had more clarity and more conversations about. But in the same token, there are things that you don't know until you're in it, right? And so one of the things that I think every couple has to have a conversation about is money and how you spend it, and what is your vision for that, and what are we looking to build? And we didn't necessarily have those questions early on. It was just like, I want to go to Sephora and you're going to be okay.
Right.
Or it was, no, this new PlayStation is coming out and I absolutely need to have it. You know what I mean? Right. Without necessarily taking into account, okay, how is this going to get paid? How are we going to save for the future? What does an emergency fund look like? Should we have an emergency fund? Like, those were not conversations that we had been equipped to have early on.
Yeah. How did you go about, like, what did it take for you to, because obviously you have it now, like, where did you, for someone that's watching us, like, I don't even know where to start, like, where do I even find these questions? What was that like for you two?
Yeah, so the first was we had to come to a place where it was like, okay, what is the lie that we're choosing to believe? Are we choosing to believe that we just will never be okay financially? Or are we choosing to believe that we can, and it's just going to take some work, right? Mm-hmm. So what were the trade-offs in that kind of conversation? And then finding and surrounding ourselves with other couples who were at a place where we aspired to be. I stopped taking advice from my single friends into my marriage because it's a different dynamic. And so for some people, it was like, oh, girl, especially for my girlfriends who were single at the time, they were like, girl, like, you should be able to do this. You're an independent woman. Like, don't worry about that. And it's like, nah, sis, like, I love that you love me like that. but it's two becoming one, right? And so we had to get really, really intentional about the boundaries that we set around our marriage, around the energy that we set around our marriage. Both of us are babies in our family, meaning that we're the last one. And so we had our siblings to look up to when we were trying to make like financial decisions. How would you guys navigate this? What are some of the suggestions that you would have? So be really intentional about who you surround yourself with once you are married, because again, the dynamic has changed.
Yeah, that's really good. So as you all started surrounding yourselves with other people who were ahead of you, and as you started asking more questions, I know your relationship began to change and take a shift where you all started to get to know each other better. How do you feel like, because I told you this before we started, me and Pauline, she is a verbal processor, and like having that language really helped our marriage. So out of finances, were there other things for you where you were able to find your husband's language, find how he communicates? And like, how much of a blessing was that to your relationship? Because I feel like there's so many people who they don't want to do the work to learn themselves for whatever reason, but they're not realizing that not only is that hurting them now, but it's going to hurt them, when they do get into a relationship.
Yeah. So I had to just ask. I think that that's one of the things that not too many people are willing to do. Get comfortable being uncomfortable because your spouse is going to see you completely exposed. Like there's nothing that stays hidden under the sun once you enter a marriage relationship. So I had to ask, babe, what do you think about this? Or this is what I'm feeling, or I am hearing you say this. Can you just confirm for me what it is that you're trying to say? So for me, I am very much the type who is like loving, and I love to be around people. I'm an encourager. And while I love all of those things, attention to detail sometimes is not my strong suit.
Yeah.
So for my husband, it would be like, I told you that already. And I'm like, oh, you did? I'm sorry. Can you text me? Can you write that down for me? So that was something that we had to learn about each other, that in order for me to retain information, I really have to write it down. I need to be able to take note of it. I need to put it in my phone or my calendar. Whereas Eric is very good in memorizing names and faces and where he met people. I think it's also a lot to do with his work. But he's good in that way. Whereas for me, it's like, I will call you my love, my darling, sweetheart, just because I want people to feel comfortable, and it's terms of endearing, so that when you enter my space, you feel welcomed. But if I run into you again, I'm like, oh, what was her name? Oh my gosh. Like, so for him, that was just like, why do you call everybody my love? Like,
I
that's
don't know
only
what
my
that is.
title.
That's the trick right there. People really know that. It's like, hey babe, hey girl. They don't know your name.
So, just kind of understanding those things.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious. All right, so taking a little bit of a shift, because
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier how you help people get money.
Oh,
Yes.
not just people, women of color.
Yeah, you're a coach who helps women of color
Yes.
essentially start making six figures. Is that correct? Is that
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you're helping someone do that, is that really a mindset thing that you're helping them shift, or is it just some practical things?
Yeah.
I'm curious if you've seen any translation from the ways what it needs to take place in order for a woman to go from not making six figures to making six figures to helping them actually accelerate in a relationship or thrive in a relationship. I'm just curious if there's a connection in any way between that.
For me, I think there is a correlation. I think that for women of color, we've been conditioned to be able to do everything for everyone and then put ourselves on the back end. So in our marriage relationship, that looks like putting the needs of my son, putting the needs of my husband, putting the needs sometimes of the ministry or my job ahead of the needs of Susanna. And when that translates, when you have not taken care of that, that shows up in the workplace because you have not been able to clearly articulate your value. You have not been able to clearly set boundaries. And so, what I find for so many of our women of color is that they end up doing the jobs of 2, 3, 4 people, and they are severely underpaid.
Yeah.
And so, there's that aspect, right? Then there's the other aspect that because you have not learned to speak through those emotions, those feelings, when something goes awry in the workplace, you're tagged as the angry Black girl or the angry brown girl because you're so passionate about something. And so when I am working with women of color who are trying to get to a six-figure level, there's different levels of pressure that get once you get into that realm. It's a whole different ball game. And so if you're not able to address some of those mindset blocks, some of those limiting beliefs, that you always need to fight, that you can't trust anybody, that you have to do it on your own, you're going to struggle when you get to that place. So you'll make the paycheck, but it won't be fruitful for you.
Yeah.
And so for me, I had to learn that I don't need to do everything on my own. There's a reason why I am equipped with being able to hire a team, with being able to delegate. I feel like sometimes women of color, we struggle with that delegation and we fall into the lie of, it's just easier if I do it. when it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, that's so good because earlier when you were sharing about the height difference and like the height situation with you and your husband, you guys were dating, I thought about like how he is kind of like the unsung hero of that situation, because like it wasn't just a matter of you surrendering your wishes to the Lord and you having an open heart to somebody who became a great spouse for you, but it was also for him being open to being with somebody who's taller, because a lot of guys are not. And I think that like that scenario, I think it's so much what you shared, like, oh, I want to be able to protect her. I want to feel like, I'm the protector, I'm the man, whatever the case is. But I also think like even the fact that he still wanted you to wear heels because he knew that that was something that you loved to do. And he was like, oh, I want you to shine. And it sounds like that's the type of marriage you all have built. Is like, I'm going to support you. Like, I see you killing it at work. I see you chasing your dreams. Like, I'm going to support you. Yeah, I'm happy that you're making this money because I'm your friend and I love you and I want you to do well. And I feel like that's one of that entire scenario just encapsulates like you can't love somebody better than the capacity that you love yourself. And like the Bible talks about that, like to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And a lot of times we can't love other people well, whether it be like in the workplace, but especially of course in our romantic relationships and just our families, like our family of origin or our kids, or like just whoever you live with, like you really can't love those people well. As you mentioned earlier, marriage is naked. It's and it's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be vulnerable. It's supposed to be open. There's supposed to be no secrets financially, physically, emotionally, whatever the case is, that person is supposed to know you inside and out, and you're supposed to know them. But the reason why that's so scary for so many people, and women too, is because you're like, I don't want anybody to know all of me. And that's honestly a lot of reasons why we run from God is because we're like, he knows everything about me. Like, I don't know, I can't really deal with that. Like, I can't even face myself. How can I face somebody who knows everything about me and I have no control, over that? And your spouse's marriage is very much that way. Like your spouse, like you mentioned, they notice things about you, like, oh, you say this. Did you know that you react this way every time? You're like, no, I actually didn't know that. Like, that's just how I lived my life. And then they're all up in your business. And you're like, dang, can you just chill? But a lot of times it can become a funny laughing moment. It can become like something that you're like, okay, like maybe I should take that person seriously. Or if you are unhealthy and you don't love yourself, it can become this huge explosive fight and argument and a rift in your marriage where you're like, this person is against me, you're always criticizing me. And it's like, no, I just really want you to, number one, I might just be curious about, why do you always say my love? Why do you always do this or do that?
Right.
Or it may be an opportunity for me to help you, realizing that's why I'm here. But I think that that's so huge. And I was just thinking about that, 20 minutes ago when you shared about that story. It was like, wow, like we cannot even surrender our lists to the Lord. We cannot be open to options that are around us. And then we can't love our spouse well when we do get there. Because like Tim said, a lot of people who are listening or watching right now, like they're not in a marriage right now, because this is a dating podcast, podcast. But a lot of the things that we've learned that help you have a more enjoyable, fulfilling, and healthy marriage, you start flexing those muscles in dating. So as you shared earlier, like, okay, we wouldn't be able to support each other through the ups and downs of just like differing incomes and things like that if we didn't get to practice that, when we're dating. And so many people, it's so funny. Oh, I was listening to something, and these women were talking about, 3 married women, they were talking about like women in the church nowadays who are like, oh, I'm not messing with him because he's this and he's that, and he used to date her and he used to do this and he used to go there. And then she's looking at these unmarried women like, you're not gonna make it. Like, if you are just like so critical, you're so critical of guys who like have a past, or like maybe they have children or something like that, and you're just like so against it. And it's like, when you get into marriage, like you're gonna know everything about this man, and you have to be so delicate. I think that's one of the things that especially women of color, as you mentioned, because we do go through a lot, and there definitely is this stigma in Black and brown cultures of like, there's so many single moms, not by choice, people are like, there's husbands jailed, like people get killed, like there's horrible things happen, but they're like, this is what I gotta do. Like all of us who have moms that are of color, we're like, my mom is strong. We've all seen our moms go through crap, and like you see her just do what she has to do. That's one thing about women of color. We're gonna do what we gotta do. But
oh yeah, we're gonna handle business.
right, absolutely. But at the end of the day, to your point, like sometimes we handle things that we don't have to handle, or handle them for longer than we need to, because it's kind of like a badge of honor, like an identity of like, I'm wounded, I'm a victim, or I'm a survivor, and things have happened to me. But I think that like we in turn sometimes can like villainize, if that's the right word, men, and we can kind of like, oh, you're not doing what you need to do, you don't do what I do, like I'm like those phrases like, oh, I'm mom and dad, and like things like that. And I think that, you know, at the same time, we have women who have experienced that or who are going through that, but they're still believing God for a husband. But when a guy comes like kind of through your path or like in front of you, your heart is so wounded and so like broken that like you don't treat him with gentleness and like kind of like that femininity that men are attracted to. It's like women kind of are like, no, you need to be hard like me, and you need to like get it together like me. And it's like, all right, I don't know about that. It's not very attractive to me, but I think that is something that we do need to work on as Black women. And like, yes, we've been through hard things, and like, you know, things have happened to you that are not fair. But like both can be true, because it doesn't really work in marriage for you to be so harsh and to be so like, I don't need help, and it hurts your marriage, it hurts the way you view yourself, and hurts the way you view, you know, your husband. And I don't think, you know, like Tim said, you guys probably wouldn't have been able to face the different challenges that you faced in the 12 years that you've been married, and even before that, if you were not so like, this is my best friend, and you know, like, he's for me.
Yeah. And like, I knew that Eric had a backbone, if you will, because he like the biggest person that he had to stand up to in terms of my height and our relationship was his mom. Because she was very uncomfortable by that. And I remember she told me one time, she was like, you in these heels, like, why do you wear these heels? And like, I just got real quiet, because I was like, I don't know how to respond. And out of like, it was almost like he darted, and he was like, Ma, I bought her those, and I like them very much. And it was at that moment where I was like, you can have my heart.
That's such a good response.
Especially because we were again very early in our relationship. I didn't know the dynamic of what this relationship was going to look like between my mother-in-law and I. And my mother-in-law has turned into my mother-in-love. But a lot of that has happened because my husband was the conduit to clear that path for us, you know? And so for the listeners who are watching, or listening or watching, I would say it's one thing to have expectations. It's another thing to just allow God to orchestrate things for you. So that you can be at a place where you're comfortable, where your relationship is open and transparent. And for the women who are bosses, who want to become bosses, it also has a direct impact to how it happens at home. Because if I adapt that mentality that I have to do everything by myself, then I'm robbing my husband from the opportunity to be the amazing father that he is. Right. I'm robbing him of the opportunity to flex his discipline muscle with our son when it is necessary. And so that is something that, man, we have to learn, you know, through that process, because not only is marriage a place where you are going to grow, but once you introduce a child, parenting will test your marriage on a whole nother level. So you have to be really clear.
Yeah, that's really good. And I heard on, you know, a podcast I was listening to, essentially what you all are talking about, how if you're a strong woman, you need a strong man. And he was talking about how, you know, his wife, when they were dating, she came from a situation where she essentially had to provide for the household and raise the sisters, and she was very self-independent. And one of the small things he did to just show his love for her and also just be the man that he wanted to be, was he didn't let her open any doors by herself. And like, she would come into the car and like try to open the door, and he tell her, close the door. I'm gonna come around and open it for you. And you know, she would get upset and she would close it. And then like the next time they get in the car, before she would touch the handle, but she wouldn't open it. And she was like, oh, I'm gonna let you open it. And then it gets to the point now where he's looking at him like, where you at? Why you ain't come open my door? And you have that transformation of, I need to do it for myself, to having the soft heart now where you're able to receive that type of love. For you and what you've seen with coaching or just with yourself, for someone listening right now who's like, yes, I am that strong woman, but I do want to be loved like that. What are some things that you suggest that they can do to receive that type of love when it comes their way? When they have a man that wants to love them well, what can they do to make sure that they don't push him off?
Yeah, I would say you have to be really self-aware in terms of being able to do the work on you. Before you can expect anyone to lead you, to provide for you, to create an environment for you, you have to be really self-aware of what are the things that I like, what are the things that I don't like, and then get curious when those things are challenged and you're immediately ready to respond. Because again, once you are tied to someone else, they are likely going to challenge your preconceived notions. Right. And so if you're in your single season right now, I would get really clear about what are the things that I enjoy, and then what are the non-negotiables, and what are the things that those are nice to have, but I don't need to have those. Right. And so for me, it was just, okay, I like when I was living by myself, it was like, I really could use someone who could help me get organized in terms of like home decor, because I think that I'm Joanna Gaines and I just end up with a whole bunch of stuff and don't know where anything goes. So being able to ask for those kinds of things, and that may seem like so minute, but if you're going to make a house a home, it's nice to have someone who can give you that type of insight. If you're in your single season and you were like me and you love to go out to eat, sis, figure out how to cook a meal or three.
Just one little side dish at a time. Just make a little rice, something.
Yes. Yeah, no, but like for example, one of the things that we do now is I hated cooking, hated it, mainly because I didn't have anything ready. Both of us were hungry and tired from work. And like the last thing that I wanted to do after working was to stand behind the stove. So what we did was we got curious and we were like, okay, well, we know we can't go out to eat all of the time because that's just not financially wise. What other options are there? So we just ended up ordering from HelloFresh. And that has been so wonderful because everything comes prepared. It comes with a recipe card and I don't have to go food shopping. Everything is in that place where it's just ready. And then it becomes something fun for the two of us. It's like, okay, babe, what do you want to have tonight? Do you want to have pork chops or do you want to have steak? Do you want to have, there's just a whole bunch of options, but now it's not so overwhelming and it's not a point of contention.
Yeah, I love that because I think that it's so many times when people hear like, oh, become more self-aware and like kind of like know yourself more, or really like, what are your weaknesses? What are your needs? Like we kind of shy away from that. And I'm sure you hear all the time in the corporate world, people ask like in interviews, like, oh, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And people always say, oh, my weakness is that I work too much or that I don't know how to, it's not really a weakness. It's like something that we really want to deny that we have, but it is honestly like blindness, and you can't get better if you don't admit your weaknesses. And for that example you just gave, like y'all wouldn't be eating, or you just be spending more money than you need to eating out, and that's causing honestly more problems. So when you ignore your weaknesses or you ignore your areas of improvement, I'm sure people call them the opportunities for improvement, you're missing out on a chance for your family or your relationship or your team or whatever to have a problem solved. So you don't want to be the weakest link. And a lot of times it does come when we're not honest with ourselves. If we think like, oh no, I don't have a problem with this. And it's like, okay, but everybody else around you says you know, so take a chance that
you're the problem.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it again, it goes back to being able to be humble, open, and transparent. I tell my husband, I'm like, I like for our relationship to be hot. And when people hear me say that, they're like, "Oh, girl," but it's really humble, open, and transparent. Like that's what I'm trying to keep
Right.
at. Because my background in terms of coming from the Caribbean, my husband should have a hot meal every single night, and I should be the one prepping it for him. And there's no question about that. But the dynamic back then is very different than the dynamic that we have right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So being again very self-aware of that, and then challenging those preconceived notions that I'm bringing from my background into this relationship.
Yeah, that's really good, because if you didn't do that work, you could be haunted by the fact that you're not cooking a hot meal every day and thinking that you're less than as a wife. Some people, it gets to that when that's just a lie from the enemy, and your husband doesn't want that from you. He just wants to have food to eat, and that could be HelloFresh, it could be you, it could be Popeyes. It doesn't matter. Just he was
something. I think that's so good, because so many of us women, we do deal with that. Again, back to like the delegation thing that you mentioned earlier, of like, because in a way you delegated meal planning to HelloFresh, and all you got to do is follow the directions, and boom, now you all have a meal. But it's, if you're not dealing with that, you know, the kind of guilt or the fear of like, okay, well, but, and you mentioned this earlier, what lies have we believed? I love that question. Like, that is so good for like all areas of our lives. Honestly, for us to find freedom, because a lot of times we put pressure on ourselves to be something, to do something that God never told us to do, that our husbands or don't expect. And it's like, I don't really care about that. Like, that's what's stressing you out. Like, oh girl, like, we can fix that up real quick. Like, oh, but my mom was like this, and all my aunts do this and do that. And it's like, we're not them, you know, like, we don't have their marriage. And like, I think that's just like a good, honest point to bring up for anybody who even has fears about getting married, or like, will I be a good wife, or how will I do this and how will I do that? And honestly, things will change. Like, I'm sure y'all haven't done HelloFresh for all 12 years, but you guys ate, you know, like, you made it through, and you may not do HelloFresh, you know, for the next 12 years. And you'll probably, as your family and your marriage and your life changes, like, the solutions to your problems will change. Well, your problems will change, and the solutions will change too. I think that, like, so much for us, like, we want to have answers. We want to have that certainty, you know, like, oh, well, how do I make sure that we don't have any problems, or that I'm going to be able to do this and be that? And that's where, you know, relying on the Holy Spirit comes in. It's like, God, give us our daily bread. Like, God will give us solutions for everything that we need each step of the way. So for anybody watching or listening who's like, yeah, man, like, 12 years married, like, that sounds good. Like, I don't know that I can do that, because, you know, like, maybe you come from a divorced family, or maybe you feel like, you know, all my relationships in the past have failed. But I mean, a marriage is not just two people, especially when you're a Christian. It's a man, a woman, and God. Like, God is there with you, helping you, giving you those solutions. So we don't want anyone to be kind of afraid of like taking assessments, of taking courses, of doing deep work, and like being honest with yourself, because as you are discovering your weaknesses, you know, it's not something that you're supposed to figure out on your own. God will help you.
Absolutely. And as you were saying that, it reminded me of two scriptures. The first is when Jesus is telling the disciples that in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. And it's a reminder to me, especially in our marriage, that when we have those rough patches, Jesus still promises that he has overcome, and so we have overcome. Right. And then the other aspect to that is the verse that says, not to get tired of doing good, right? Not to get weary of doing good, for in due season you'll reap a harvest. And I think that for many of us, we expect the harvest to happen immediately, like as soon as we put the seed in the ground. It's taken us 12 years to get to this point. Right. And so being able again to use the word in practicality for your marriage, going into it, will really help both of you find level ground.
Yeah, no, I love that. It takes time, and that's okay. This has been so good, Susanna. Like, we really, really appreciate it. Is there any final thought? And maybe you just gave it with the 2 verses, and that's totally cool. If you did, then you just let people know how they can connect with you. But if you have a final thought that you want to share with people, and also how can they connect with you, let them know about the course or whatever else that you want them to know about, for sure.
Sure. Absolutely. So the one thing that I want to share is, don't let a stage become a state. Okay. And I say this quite a bit. Don't let a stage of singleness be a state where you feel like you live in. Don't let a stage of difficulty be the place where you pitch your tent and now you live in a state of difficulty. Be willing to do the work to refine and to get better. So I hope that encourages someone. Don't let a stage become a state. And then you can find me on Instagram. I am _ Susanna Alba. You can find me on TikTok as well. Same handle. I am _ Susanna Alba. And I work with women of color who are in mid-level management jobs who are looking to land 6 figures. And if that is what you're interested in doing and you need help with that, I would be more than welcomed to have a conversation with you and help you to do that, and do it with grace, with excellence, and more importantly, with the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Yeah. So yeah, that's me.
I love that. Get your money and relationships right. I love it.
Come on. It's funny because I think people think about wealth and they don't realize how much God talks about it in the Bible. And it's like wealth and Jesus don't go together. And it's like, Jesus had a treasurer to his ministry. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. No, that's real. And they say that like Jesus talks about money more than anything else in the Bible. So I agree with that. And yes, please check out her course if that is where you find yourself and you're like, look, I know I should be making more money than I am. And you just push, you need that guidance. She can definitely help you with that. This has been another episode of the W Podcast. We know you got something out of it, whether you're a man and you need to get over being short, whether you're a woman and you need to allow a man to love you and soften your heart. There's something that was valuable in this week's podcast. We love you. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this video.
To get more Christian relationship advice, subscribe to our channel.
And make sure you check out our other videos as well.